For the very first team that we are going to discuss, we have Liberate. These guys were right on the cusp of moving into the finals and just didn't quite make it there. We saw them make that mad dash for points in the last game of the group stages, and I thought to myself, as we kind of watched them play a slow and quieter game, it was right in their grasp, literally right in their grasp, but they just couldn't quite do it. But what I can say is when they did finally pull out and start trying to get the frags off, it was something. It was definitely something. And I think that Liberated might need to make a little bit more of a jump in the aggressive direction if they wanna pull through. But I have faith. You know, we have some experience on the roster. We have great players on the roster. They definitely have the potential, and if they can piece it together, I think something special will happen with this. But let's go right into it. Trevor, what were you seeing from Liberate, and what are you thinking about them moving forward?
Sure. Liberate's a team that, I mean, they've been in both finals that have happened so far, and they've made a couple roster changes, and I feel like they never really, the first 2 weeks, they didn't really get their footing, and it started to kind of show the last week. They had their best weekend this past weekend, 28 points on Saturday, 27 on Sunday. And I feel like this tournament's actually going to be really good for them moving forward, because maybe they're a team that was struggling a bit as far as, like I was saying, new roster changes coming in, but now they get to go against teams that they should feel they're better than. Like there's a lot of confidence goes into that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like kind of like a lot of times, like when we fight a lower, like on the lobby team, everybody gets a burst of confidence, and they see when they get the first knock, they're like, oh, it's this team. Let's just roll through them. And I mean, that's just something that happens with time and experience. But like now, Liberate stepping into like a challenger series, you know, if they knock a team that they may have never heard of, like, you know, they'll just be like, okay, let's roll through this. So I'm interested to see if they stick with the same loot spots. I'm interested to see, you know, that's one thing might be happening here with the PCS teams that move in. Are they going to take better loot spots that they couldn't get in the PCS competition? And but there's enough talent on that team that I don't think that we're going to have any problem seeing them come back into PCS for the next season.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Syl, anything you wanted to add to that?
I think Liberate as a team, considering, I guess, if we look back at this group stage, you know, we discussed that they were a team that made major changes to their roster, like, you know, pretty much a completely new team other than one guy. And I'm sure that although they put in a lot of work to kind of maintain their momentum throughout, you know, PCS 1 and 2 to carry that to PCS 3 was a task that was very hard, and maybe they might not have handled too well, because I feel like changing personnel in terms of structure, like not only just structure, but just like in terms of gameplay and approach and whatnot, I think is very difficult for any team to tackle. But I think they had a harder time considering the kind of teams they were seeing possibly like in their development stage. Because I feel like on Miramar, they had an extremely hard time because of where they looted and the kind of priority spots they tried to choose. And I think that, you know, we ran into them a lot. I'm sure Oath ran into them a lot as well. And I think that their development can only improve and kind of like speed up and come into the Challengers Cup, because they kind of have that chip on the shoulder where they're like, oh, like, you know, we didn't make it out of groups this time, but I think that if we could push through Challenger Cup for whatever's next and we can develop off of this, let's make sure we play well so that we can play better in the future together.
Definitely. Gunner, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, they should be like, I mean, one of the teams that shouldn't have a problem at all making it through. I mean, just based off of experience itself, they could probably get through there. Like they have, I mean, a former PEL player, they have Baja, and then the rest of the guys have been, you know, through this PCS process for, you know, pretty much every PCS now. So I don't see them really having an issue. I was really pulling for them in the last game. Like, I know, like, well, we call it Keenan compound, but they were sitting in it and they just weren't getting any kills, but they were getting zones. So it's just like one of those things where, uh, you know, they were getting fed, but they needed more points than they were able to really put up. And I think even if they won the game when they pushed across the road, I don't think they had enough points either. So it was pretty unfortunate. But again, I don't see that team really having an issue at all. In the current lobby as it sits, they should be able to They should be a top 3 team, 100%, if not win it.
Agreed, most definitely. And that brings us into the next team though, which was Virtue, which was another one of those teams that were really right on the cusp of the finals, but unfortunately they fell a bit short. And I thought at the very last match that like Evasion may have potentially clutched that so his team could go forward and succeed. It looked like he was sacrificing himself actually so that the team could go and succeed and make something happen. I think he took out like almost all of Dodge by himself there. But unfortunately, the team fell in rotation and he didn't get too far past that himself. But I did like what I saw from Virtue. I think that as the weeks went on, they looked more comfortable in the plays that they did and stuff like that. So I think they have a good chance of pulling through in Challengers Cup. But let's go to you, Syllogic. What are your thoughts on Virtue?
Seeing Virtue as a team, I've always seen like Evasion X as a player that no matter what team he's on, I've seen him kind of like take that extra step and take that extra risk that either it's going to work fantastic and it's going to net his team like a move or extra plays and just more room in general. Either that or it's like that kind of like almost death wish kind of play where like, oh, if he gets this, it'll be crazy. But if he dies right now, that's super punishing for his team. And, you know, he's willing to push that extra mile. And I'm pretty sure that with more work and time with his team that they can figure out how to utilize that in a safer fashion. But I did see them as a kind of scrappy team that would fight like a bit early on too. And they were one of those teams that came in with that like kind of chip on their shoulder of like, oh, we're completely new. But I think that what we can put together with this amount of time should be good so long as we try to fight and show that, you know, we're here not just as, you know, like we're not trying to go out bottom 8, but we're going to try to do some damage before we go. Because they ended up doing a bit better than I thought. And I thought that when they were handed advantages, they could have possibly used that advantage just slightly more. And I think Virtue like have one of the highest chances going into this Challengers Cup because they definitely have some shooters, and I think that if they can put it together, that they could be a strong team for this Challengers Cup.
Definitely, I agree. I certainly agree. Gunner, how about you on Virtue? What are your thoughts?
I like the team, and like when I look at the roster and just from experience with scrims, like they have a ton of potential. I mean, I know for a fact just from watching scrims and like VODs, like where they struggle is just there seems to be like a little miscommunication in some of like the plays and the like team fighting that they do. But like individually, I think that team could probably I think it's another almost guaranteed top 8 team. Like I just off of experience and off of like individual mechanical skill, I don't see them having any problem at all getting through this lobby. Same as Liberate. I think it's, I think the experience and the mechanical skill is just going to basically carry them, into the top 8, even if they, my assumption is correct, which could definitely be wrong, in which they have like some issues team fighting and some miscommunication issues, but they'll be in top 8. I guarantee that.
Agreed. Trevor, take it home.
Yeah, I'd probably lean on points from Sean and Gunner here. That Virtue's definitely like they're a scrappier team. It seems like they want to fight a lot, and but then with what Gunner said is I think when you are a scrappy team, you have to rely on teamwork a lot, and a lot of like communication goes into that. A lot of awareness of how your teammates want to play. You have to know what to expect, like from people. Like if we take a fight on my team, everyone has an idea of what's going to happen. Segers is going to like hold mid range. Bale and Reller are going to get in their face. Pat's going to make some, rat cap play and get a kill, and so I think they're a team if they want to play this play style, they just need more time together. And it's another situation, kind of like Liberate, where maybe in a less punishing lobby, that play style will prevail for them in a big way. So I'm with the guys here. They're definitely going to make it through. All those guys have been around long enough. They know what they're doing. And I think, when you play that style, you have a lot of high highs or low lows. But in this lobby, I think they'll have some high highs.
Definitely. 100%. And that brings us on to Gravity, which was honestly, for me, I think that they were one of the scrappiest teams going in from the PCS side of things. And I think it's hard to say, but I think they're definitely the team to keep your eye on for scrappiness. There were matches where they didn't get too many kills, but lasted to the end game, and then it seemed like there was the contrast of getting some early kills and then falling off without really translating into much more. Lipson is certainly the standout player and the one to watch for going into Challengers Cup. I'm not too sure about that play the other day that we saw where he was kind of prone next to the Dacia, just kind of staring at, I think it was Lampola. I'm not too sure what that was, but with that out of the equation, he accounted for over 36% of that team's damage and kills. So we know he's obviously quite capable, but what are your thoughts with Gravity, Gunner?
All right. Well, not to repeat myself, but Gravity's another team that I think, they shouldn't have a problem getting top 8, and that's pretty much all it's about, right? But, the lips in play, I before I forget, I believe he was like, I feel like he probably should have took that flush and the knock. It was pretty free, but I think he was waiting and lining up to see if someone else was coming. But other than that, I mean, the team is, it's pretty solid. Like, I know D-Rich has a lot of experience. I mean, they all actually have a lot of experience and PCS experience too. And I think that'll just help them when they get, game time in the lobby and the nerves are coming. And, after a few games, if they have bad performances, it's teams like that who have the experience that know, like, it's, after a couple bad games, it's the tournament's not over. And, and in 12 games, a lot could happen. So, and most of the time you see it coming down to the wire where one big game kind of separates the pack a little bit. So I think that team will be fine as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Trevor, how about you? What are your thoughts on Gravity?
Gravity, I feel like one of their issues in the PCS group stage here was that I don't think they never really had a drop spot. They were a team that would fill other drop spots, like depending on the day. Like I know they looted Milta half the time, like right next to us. I mean, and they like to play extremely slow on the edge initially. Like I don't think I've ever had a team shoot us from the blue more than Gravity was. It was the most frustrating experience for us, like in a lot of situations. But I think if they can, they're a team that has a lot of experience, like Gunner's saying, and if they do get those established drop spots within this lobby, they should carry through just fine. That's a top 8 team.
Definitely. Syllogic, to round it out here, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, just looking at the numbers of Gravity and how I mentioned how like Virtue was like a bit more one of the scrappiest teams. It turns out that Gravity was actually had the most kills for anyone in the bottom 8, and I think the sentiment can carry over of where I feel like they probably had a lot of ideas of how they want to play, but I guess like stemming off of Trevor's idea of not having like that kind of own home to develop out of, they kind of ran into this problem where they ran into all the other teams that had similar ideas. If not, like if whether it's like a rotation related thing, I think that whenever you're a new team or like leadership changes, whenever you come into a lobby, you kind of get this sense that hey, like if we can establish ourselves within like this like stage and kind of like play the way we want to play, I think it'll like work out. But I think the difference here is that we're coming into a PCS group stage where pretty much throughout this entire year, these are the best teams out of North America, and that even though the Challenger Cup can shuffle teams in and out, I think that Gravity came in from last time making the finals of PCS2 to now not making it. I think they had a harder time this time figuring things out. But on top of that, I think that they might have made a couple of decisions that maybe prevented them from moving forward. Whereas Trevor was saying, I don't think there was a time where we ever saw these guys shoot from the blue like as many times as anybody else. And I think that sometimes you have to choose whenever you're approaching a game. Like you have to like visualize for a deeper impact in the sense of where if you do make a risky choice now, is it going to be something that either A, stops you from going forward deeper into the game no matter what you do, whether you got to kill, you lose somebody, or is it going to be something that you think is worth so that you can establish your place in the map? And I think they had a bit of a harder time choosing in between, and that they generally chose the latter. So it gave them a hard time considering the kind of teams they faced as well, I think.
I agree. I agree. Anything else that anybody wants to add about Gravity before we move on? Anything in okay, perfect. So let's talk about Clueless. So we talked about the potential of this team, and certainly after speaking with some people about it, it seemed like their previous performance in Challengers was strong, but then when it came into PCS, it was a bit more difficult. And I know that we kind of talked about that before we went live about the difficulties that some of these teams face. You know, when you're in a lobby who might not have as much experience in it, and you know, like the top teams in NA in it, it's less punishable, right? You can get away with a lot more. But then when that translates into PCS and you're going against teams that have the experience and have the capability, you don't get away with a whole lot, right? But moving forward, with all that said, this might be the opportunity they need to figure it out. You know, they might need just a little bit more cohesion to piece it together. There was times where they were, when I think back to a match, I want to say they actually won it, but they were in the crates right outside of South George, and they just kind of hung tight. You know, I think there was a lot of opportunities to get frags there, but they just kind of hung tight. So I think as they work at getting better balance with the team and they work at being a little bit more aggressive, they'll find that success. But Trevor, let's start with you when it comes to Clueless.
When it comes to Clueless, I mean, Gunner's right. We're sounding a little bit like broken records here, but I mean, this is a team that was in the top 8. I expect Ham to come out and just farm like he did the last time he played in the Challenger Cup. Like, this is a team when, you know, I think it's a similar situation to Gravity was in the previous like conversation we had, where they didn't really have a home. They didn't really know what they're doing. It was their first time for a couple of them to come back and play with the big boys, just, you know, so to say. And I think they'll find comfort really early. And they'll have some really big games because they have a lot of fragging power on that team. Like, I would consider them to have a lot of fragging power even against, you know, some of the better teams in PCS. So when they're playing against, you know, players that they feel they're stronger than, I think a lot of confidence will drive that, and they'll carry them through, kind of like it did last time. But yeah, that's a top 8 team.
Definitely. Syl, what are your thoughts on Clueless?
You know, like Trevor said, like, you look at this roster on paper and you see, you know, previous like Clueless, you know, veteran NHS, you see Nick 101, you see Sharu, and you see Hambino, and you look at each one of these players other than NHS and think like, we've seen them on rosters before of where they're one player that stands out from the rest. And you kind of sandwich that together and you can make a really good team. But I feel like I saw them in a lot of spots where they were initially in a spot that was very workable. But once they leave that, once they're pushed away by the circle, that sometimes you can see that some people are kind of forced into making their own decisions where they, you know, like, oh, like, this place sounds good, this place sounds good. And then they eventually execute and they're like, no, you know what? This actually sounds better. And there was a moment like in the Milton Power Circle where I saw them, you know, they disconnected from voice and they kind of like were running around like almost like headless chickens, like, you know, literally like their name kind of Clueless, you know. But, you know, seeing that kind of disconnect, and I think that when it comes to putting a squad like that together, you need someone that is the dominant voice of the team. You need someone that says, this is what we're doing and we need to do it now. Doesn't matter what you think, you know, we just need to do it. You know, like it doesn't matter what you think is better. It doesn't matter what like I think is better. I think that we all can agree and get on the same page that we need to do this right now. And I think that while they were able to figure out how to set themselves up, they weren't able to figure out how to put it together at least all the way towards the end to maximize every single game. Because back to the point of, if you look at this roster on paper, I arguably saw that Clueless was going to be one of the bigger teams that came out of Challenger and could almost just force their will in the lobby and kind of like fight their way out to top 8. And agreed. Honestly, yeah, like, you look at the team, Hambino, Nick 101, Shuru, like, all these guys can be ADR farmers where they just like where they just put impact no matter where they're put on the map. And I think that if they're able to put together like a common mindset come this Challenger Cup, that they are in high chances of winning it. Like more than any other team. I feel like there's more potential in that team than any other team.
Definitely. Right now. Definitely. Anything you wanted to add to that, Gunner?
Yeah, I mean, you know, to add on what they said, like, it's the team definitely has a ton of potential. Like, most of the guys, you'll pretty much know from, previous competitions, and like Sil said, like, a lot of them were standout players. I'll be honest, when I look at the team, like, I don't think they're gonna have a hard time getting top eight. Um, but I mean, you can definitely tell. I mean, at least I could tell, and from my perspective, they're just like, you can tell they're having leadership issues. They're indecisive. They're, in some situations, extremely confident, in others not so much. So I think, hopefully that's something that can get ironed out with like scrims, or just talking to each other and just having to sit down as a team and discussing the problems, because I think a lot of their problems really aren't coming from mechanical skill. It's just more so it's decision making, and probably, the leadership on the team, and could be clashing a little bit. So, I don't want to speak for them. It might not be the issue at all, but that's just my opinion from watching them play and watching them scrim. But I mean, the team's fantastic. I love all those guys, and they're all great players. So hopefully, I mean, hopefully they just dominate this. Like, they definitely have the potential to.
Definitely. Definitely, 100%. And that brings us on to Ascendance. So, Ascendance had some shining moments in the group stages and some difficult ones, right? When they would get kills earlier in the match, it seemed like they had difficulties finding the stabilities further into the match. And I think if they can tighten that up a bit, we'll see a stronger showing from the team overall. One thing I can say that I do like from them is their flexibility that they displayed in the group stages. If they can just make that happen and they can remain consistent, I think we'll see some good things come out of them, and I think that'll be pretty pivotal in their success. But Syllogic, what are your thoughts on Ascendance?
So Ascendance is the former team of Carnage Gaming, and they largely maintained the same roster. And I always thought this was a team where, as much as they wanted to kind of replicate what some of the greater teams do, I felt like they had issues of where they have a vision, but they have a hard time maintaining it throughout the game. And I see, like, signs of them, like picking a spot early, going to it early, like picking this like a kind of center spot of where they can have access to these kind of priority spots, have a center play style, and also a scrappy play style too. Because I've seen them, like make a move a great team would, of where they may be sitting comfortable, but they take that extra mile and sweep out like one side of the circle so they can maintain it. I think there's good signs, but they're having a hard time getting there, in the sense of where whatever decision they make, no matter what kind of team they do want to like, or like no matter what great team they want to be, they kind of have this ongoing like replicative problem of where they run into these teams early, of where they are either going to completely wipe them out or get wiped themselves. And I think that as much as they're trying to assert themselves as a team that can, like be really good, I think they're having a hard time connecting their own vision versus the vision they like kind of created for themselves in chase of, what the top teams in North America do.
Definitely. Gunner, what are your thoughts on Ascendance?
I mean, they're a pain in the ass to us a lot. So that's one thought. I mean, it's definitely a team with a ton of potential. Like, I would, when I was spectating like tier 2 scrims like months ago, I would always say to the stream, like, this team has a ton of potential if they could just like get their shit together. And you know like, they do like crazy sends a lot, like kind of like Oath back in the day. Like, they used to, I mean, like, like
That's
Oath used to do some wild shit. Like, they'd like all of a sudden they'd be on the edge, and we'd have like 4 UASs just come freaking roaring past us, and literally,
hey,
like,
man.
literally our comms
We
are like, Purdy would be like, yeah, that's Oath, like 100%. Like,
oh,
I'm spectating muted, and I'm like, yeah, well, he's right. That's Oath, all right. But yeah, I mean, like, they do some crazy stuff sometimes, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But when you have a play style like that, if it's not working more often than not, then you'll find yourself out of like that top 16, in which they did. But I mean, they're a great group of guys, and I think I think the potential on that team is very high. And although I do bust their balls sometimes, I think that
I used to
team.
as well.
I think that
don't
that
say.
team the team has a future, and like they have a spot in the scene in North America, and they have the potential to do it. Like as long as they um, take stuff serious and practice and just work on things that they feel like they're doing wrong. It's a pretty solid team.
Definitely. Trevor, anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think Gunner kind of hit it on the head. You know, they're similar to how he feels about them. Like when I think of Ascendance, I think they're kind of the pain in the butt too. Like they're a team that loots around. I mean, specifically, it makes sense for Gunner and I both because they loot Azahar on Miramar. So they either try to come in behind STK, or they try to come in behind us. Like either way they go, and but then a lot of times they do these like crazy send plays, and it kind of feels like you know, when I look at them, maybe that they're kind of like we were in the early stages, like Gunnar was saying. Like maybe they just have a lot of stuff to figure out. Like we played a similar play style, and maybe my players can frag a little harder, so we were able to get away with a little bit more at that time. But you know, we took our share of butt kickings as well. Like I mean, we might have qualified for Sweden. We did terrible there, and we came home and we learned how to play the game a little bit better by working on it. So this is a team, if they put the work in, that like Gunner's saying, they'll carve out their spot within the top 16 of North America, and they'll always be in that competition. So yeah, I expect them to go through this next tournament here, and yeah, they just need to put some work in.
Definitely. Definitely. I like what I'm seeing from Ascendance, so I think with a few tweaks they can be there. Most definitely. But that brings us on to San Diego Rarity. I'm not sure. I'm still kind of confused as to what happened that caused them to get all of that smoke from gas cans, match after match after match. I don't know what was said. I don't know how it was said, but something I feel like had to have happened to cause all of those hot drops. But when watching San Diego, if I could talk, San Diego Rarity, the one thing that stuck out to me was their caution. And very similar to some of the other teams that we'd mentioned previously, I would like to see a little bit more aggression come out of them. You know, there was times where I saw them in pretty solid positions, but they played it low and slow. You know, and it's not necessarily always a bad thing, but if you press on the brakes, you got to know when to press on the gas. And I think that this team could certainly use a little bit more gas coming into this Challengers Cup. But I think, what was that?
Funny, well, I don't know if they want more gas.
I think they're okay on the gas. That was bad wording. But I know that they definitely seem to be a little bit stronger on the days where they weren't forced to take other drop spots. You know, when they were able to take Posada, when they were able to take Pachinki, it felt more comfortable for them, as opposed to the days where they had to go up against, you know, Sonics and obviously elected to choose a different drop spot. But I think if the team can find their balance playing edge when they're forced to as well and converting that, I think we'll see something come out of San Diego Rarity. But Gunnar, let's start with you when it comes to San Diego Rarity.
Yeah, with SDR, I mean, actually, I really like these guys. Like, I mean, I don't like know them too much personally, but I've watched them play for like so long now that I've become familiar with you know, them and like I guess like their personalities and stuff. But as far as like players go, I think I think they're probably going to be top 3. I think I think they're one of like the few teams that have like a mindset of just wanting to constantly get better. And again, I don't know them very well, but from what I see in scrims and stuff, I personally feel like they want to get better and like they take games serious. Like I'm sure like every team messes around every now and then, but um, a team has a lot of potential, and I think their work ethic will carry them to like back into, you know, or through the Challenger Cup.
Definitely. Trevor, what are your thoughts on them?
Sierra's an interesting one. Like, it's you know, when you play 15 games of your group stage out of like arguably some of the best loot spots in the map, it makes me question all like what was going on with them in their camp. Maybe it's that they were constantly having to switch play styles, or or I don't know if they a lot of times when teams play another team's loot spot, they'll try to like copy that team in a way. Maybe they didn't hold up to the Sonics play style as well, but they definitely seem like they're a bunch of they're hard workers. Like they want to grind the game. They've been around forever. Like a lot of these names, like you've always like Gunner saying, I've seen him scrim for a long time. I think I got one of the only committed Bolt players in all of PUBG. That's one thing. Like when I think of STR, I think one of them's got an M24. I don't know if that's like the greatest thing because in my opinion, but they stick to what what they do, and it worked for them in the past. And I think this is a team that will have a mentality shift, like I was saying about the other teams when they go against the coming up teams, the challenger level teams. And if they can get some confidence rolling early, then I think they're also going to be in that top 8.
For sure. Syllogic, what are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, to touch on the point of where Trevor mentioned they play 15 games out of somewhere different. I think I saw a lot of moments of where they might have taken our drop spots, but replicating a team directly on their drop spots is actually a lot more complicated than one might think. So, one thing that's for sure is missing is like we might play different spots in circle 1 and circle 2, circle 3 compared to them, and even though they might choose the same ways to get there, the same rotations, the same spots, I think that it's a lot more difficult considering that there is a communication aspect that is very unknown, and that unless it is publicly stated or publicly broadcasted, that you will never really figure out. Because what a lot of teams tend to do is have a unique way of approaching every single game, no matter where the circle goes, and that if there's a general direction that it goes, if you take there's a kind of formality in like the terms of what's normal to a team. So if a circle goes east, we're gonna go to like an X place, or some team will expect us there and do their homework about it. But I think that when you're trying to be like half and half, you're having this like, I feel like they ran into this kind of identity issue of where they wanted a different drop spot, but once we're in the lobby, it has to change. I think that a huge change like that can only be confusing at times, because when you're at a different part of the map, you're dealing with different terrain, you're dealing with different loot, you're dealing with different kinds of, like different teams around you, and that like I feel like that could double the amount of homework that you have to do in the other teams around you. But if you can balance that, that's something that's very versatile, because then that makes you an extremely versatile team that can pretty much go up against anybody no matter where you loot. And I feel like that's one of the highest skill sets in PUBG that a team like San Diego Rarity didn't understand to the fullest, and that something like that is extremely difficult, not only for the team or for the shot caller or for the coach and and the whole staff in general, but in the whole team. But I think that they had a bit of an identity issue, like you said, how they were kind of passive. It's kind of odd where they were given a couple opportunities, but they didn't take that extra step to secure certain things. And I think, if they can establish themselves and kind of play a consistent style, that they'll be able to figure it out a little bit easier than if they were to constantly change it up week to week. So, yeah, that's about it.
Definitely. I agree. And that brings us on to the next team, which is Elusive. And I think they're probably only a few steps away from finding whatever it's going to take to make them gel well. Watching them, it kind of felt like there was a lot of times where they would struggle on team fights, and when it seemed like the camera was spectating them, it was just kind of like damage control. That's what we were watching for the most part. Things not going so well and them trying to dig themselves out of a hole. When they did aggress, though, when we did see that, it looked pretty good. What I can definitely say about that, though, Detonator, he is their standout player by far. He accounted for 34% of the damage, I believe it was. And it's great when you have all players firing on all cylinders and everybody's fragging out of their mind. But if that can't be the case, maybe enabling that star player to do what they do best might be the play. I can't quite say it, but I think if they can shore up some of those team fight issues that they had and find a way to kind of showcase what Detonator brings to the table, I think they can probably have some great things take place. But Gunner, what are your thoughts there on Elusive?
Well, I although Detonator had like shining moments, I think Sneak Attack top fragged. and like I know he was making plays too, but
Mm.
I gotta double check. However, I mean, it's 4 great guys that have been around playing the game for a while too and grinding. I really like the team. I I like how they play. Like I just think, kind of like you were saying. Like I think maybe they just need to work on like a few things, like maybe the team fighting or comms. Like it's hard to really dissect exactly what the team's problem is if you're not like in there with them. Losing people early, stuff like that. Like I think they're just making a few minor mistakes that they can clean up, especially coming into this lobby. But I think they're a top 5 team in this lobby for sure, and I think they'll have no trouble getting through it.
Definitely. Trevor,
And I
how
like sneak attack a lot.
Sneak's awesome. Sneak's awesome. Trevor, what are your thoughts on them?
I think this is a team that I think they kind of similar to what you said about Diego Rarity. They kind of maybe suffer from a little bit of an identity crisis here. Like sometimes it feels like they just all want to play super pat. Like this is a team that will they'll sit in a compound, not shoot, and let you walk in, and try to rat you. And then other times, Sneak Attack did top frag, but you have Destinator who put out 6k damage, and for a team that didn't score that many placement points or didn't weren't in that many end game situations, that put up 6k damage is pretty good. That's like only 2,000 behind Rello, but Rello had twice the survival tab of this guy. So and so I feel like maybe they made a change going into this with bringing in a new player, but there is a lot of experience in that team. And maybe they got off to a slow foot and the pressure kind of started to get to them because they've always been just kind of they're always near, the bottom 8, but they've always been around in the PCS stuff, even before that in the NPL contenders days. And, they always make it to the relegation matches so I expect them to make it out of this, but I feel like they got to figure out, are they going to like fully commit to this? Like, are we the rat team that doesn't want to shoot and we want to snake our way in and get our points, or do they want to start taking ground, being aggressive, like having their presence known on the map?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I expect them to do against the lower level teams
For sure. And passing that on to Syllogic. Syl, what are your final thoughts on this team?
Kind of segueing off of Trevor's point of where they've been around, I think the whole identity crisis thing can apply to where this team has always been able to kind of establish where they are. And I don't think they have really had establishment issues per se, but I think that no matter who the kind of players they had, like, I guess like look through and then brought in, I think that you can look at each of these players and say like they all have the capability, but they all have this kind of how you said like whenever the camera was on them, it looked like they were doing damage control. I feel like there was a lot of times where they couldn't really make the decisions to take that extra step of like, we need to do this and we need to take this now, instead of having this like, oh, like, do we do it now, or like, oh, do we do it later, and then like kind of have this like in between of where that in between really gets you killed sometimes. And I think that looking at Destinator's numbers, he had the most damage by like a pretty decent margin, and I think that he was one of their latest, like, I guess, like imports from maybe like a lower level of play of where they, kind of saw this potential to go forward. But I think that when they came into this lobby, that they ran into a lot of other teams that were maybe not so established. I think that could have also thrown them off as well, because usually I think around PCS 1 and 2, we saw a lot more establishment of where everyone kind of knew where everybody was, and we kind of had like this very stable group stage, even in the finals, of where like every single team knows exactly what each team is doing. But I feel like this group stage was a story of, I guess, like it's like one of the last tournaments of the year, so we better bang it out. Like we better get out there and make sure we come out swinging. And I think that some of these teams have also taken that decision, but also forgot to count for like when they do need to be like slow, when they do need to be when they do need to like take that step back, or just like that decisive step of no matter what they do, they have to do it like at the very moment that they see it. And I think that Elusive itself was one of the teams that like there was a funny tweet by Portal the other day of where he said, like a couple of these teams have never killed this team, and then like Zenith has killed. He says Zenith has killed everyone except Elusive, and I think that if you're one of those teams, it's kind of an odd stat to say, but I think that when you look at their kind of numbers, like they had this, very even placement. There was like not a single person not a single person would snake all the way to the end. It'd have a very, even kind of distribution of where it's either they all die together or they all go through together. And I think if they can work on a more stable play style where they can kind of avoid things early, that it can benefit them very much. Because I think a lot of times when the camera was on them, it was kind of early or to this mid game of where they kind of ended up not doing enough for themselves.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And that brings us to our last PCS team to make it on in here, which is Pros Don't Snake. And there was, I feel like I'm like a broken record for sure, but they were in some pretty tough and challenging positions, and a lot of the times we saw them. But there were other times where they were in absolutely amazing positions, but just weren't able to quite capitalize on it. And similar to Elusive, I think that if they can find their balance in some of those team fights, I think we could see them certainly do a lot better than what we saw in the group stages. I think a little aggression would certainly convert into some more points for them, and I think moving forward with I can't quite say addition of Dirty Zen, but what I can certainly say is that Dirty Zen was out due to an emergency surgery, which I was unaware of up until this point, but he was out for emergency surgery for the first day of play, I believe, and then kind of was still recovering as the weeks went on, and I know that he's a frontliner for them. So when you have one of your more aggressive players who's just recovering and maybe not playing up to snuff because of the recovery, it might be difficult. It might be difficult for him. But with him back in the mix 100% now, I think it'll be a little bit better for them going into this. But yeah, let's talk about it. Trevor, what are your thoughts on Pros Don't Snake?
Yeah, this is a team that, I mean, initially they filled for the old Yahoo team that didn't make it in, or like they didn't field a roster. So they kind of came in last minute, and I feel like they never really got their footing, like at all. And going off your point, seeing that, Dirty Zen, he didn't play 5 games, and he's definitely one of their stronger, like more well-known players, I'd say. And I mean, he played 5 less games than, his 2 of his teammates, and he still put up almost the same damage numbers and the same frags and more knocks than them. And they got on a really slow foot. Their first weekend, they only had 16 points. And I just felt like the morale in that camp must have not been very high in the actual games. Like when you can't ever, feel like you're getting anything going. And so I think this is a team that's going to be on the bubble. Like they could maybe drop out of the top 8, but they might need, another challenger cycle, or maybe they get back into the group stage in another group stage cycle, but they're gonna need some more experience to really start getting their footing and work together as a team. And so they're a big question mark for me going into this weekend or into this tournament.
Makes sense. Syllogic, what are you seeing from PDS?
I see a standout player in PDS, and I think I actually did not know about the Dirty Zen story of where Tadine was in there, for 5 games, and I think like that's very difficult considering you have a starting lineup of where like we're committing forward with this for this group stage and for an emergency to happen. I feel like it's very hard to continue, and even though it's off the first week, it's almost like you're missing almost a week or like even a day of play of where like that whole day you kind of try to take in what you can, but you have this problem of where that kind of like core aspect isn't there, and it might make it whether it makes it more difficult or whether it like completely changes the dynamic. I did see one player stand out, and his name is Sociopath, and I think that he's a player that is capable, and I think I saw a couple of times where PDS might have relied on his aggression or his kind of playmaking in order to make their plays themselves. So, whether he was, using a sniper and whatnot, I feel like his output only carried them forward, but I feel like they need to go through the cycle of where, like they need to relearn kind kind of like their establishment as a team. And I think that if they can figure out a way to play rather than like solely relying on like one side of where, like, maybe they might rely on Sociopath, maybe they might rely on Dirty Zin, or I feel like if they can evenly distribute the structure better, possibly it could net them better results. Because looking at this right now is like you have about, even though Dirty Zin played about like 25 out of 30 games, you see a huge stat difference in terms of kills, damage, and like time survived, between a lot of these players. And I think that when you look at the sheer numbers, it can tell you one story, but we don't know the story necessarily behind their team. And I think like this was a team that I saw put together like just before this event, and we see some names here that have been playing for a while, but I think some of these players have never truly made their way to the top to know what works and what doesn't as well.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the hardest things to figure out, no matter the talent you have. And if you can have somebody that kind of, like studies what, regularly works and what's regularly, taking these teams to the top, that you can try to replicate that, but you also have to have a deeper understanding of what happens behind that kind of move in order to understand, hey, like, they did that because so and so saw this, instead of like, oh, they just did that just because they knew, or like, like there's a reason behind everything and they need to figure that out, I feel.
Got you. I agree. And Gunner, any last points on PDS?
Yeah, I mean, this is a team like I really want to see do well. And like I know they want to do well. They missed some scrim time coming into like the start of group stages, which I know kind of hurt them because they weren't sure at first if like Yahoo was going to like maintain two of the roster to keep playing. So yeah, I mean that definitely hurt them a little bit.
Yahoo.
Not I call him Yahoo, all right?
Yahoo.
Yahoo.
It's Yahoo.
It's my team name, Yahoo.
It's
Yep.
Yahoo. It's Yahoo to me, all right? But I mean, no, it definitely hurt them. Like they didn't even know if they were playing. They couldn't get a feel for the group and the teams. I mean, hopefully they were paying attention to it. But I mean, one thing I'll say is like Sociopath has like reached out to me before and like just like picked my brain a little bit on things, and like that's something like I really respect as a player. And work ethic is big. And some of these teams, they just show up and they scrim and that's it. Like they're there because they're supposed to be there, and like that's it's just gonna hurt them in the long run. And like I feel like um when I have someone message me just to see if maybe this guy knows something, maybe he has some knowledge on something, and just ask me questions, like it shows a lot about a person. So I want to see them do well. And a lot of the issues with these teams are they're a lot of, and I'm not just like, this is off topic of PDS, just in general. A lot of them like aren't very proactive in group stages. And if you go back and you watch these games, and like personally like watch a map stream, try and follow some of these teams, like a lot of them react off of what other teams do around them. And what ends up happening if you're a team that plays like that is, you end up losing players, or you end up getting third partied or snuck up on. And what you need to be, if you look at like, I mean, for instance, any one of our teams, you need to be proactive and basically go out, get information. Like at there's no point in the game where we're pretty much not talking to each other. Like it's never quiet. Um, we're always bouncing information off of each other and just seeing and stretching how much information can we get, like find out the teams around us. And with a lot of these teams, they just kind of find a spot, and then you know not really, I guess, hope they get circle, but they just react when the circle pops, as opposed to obtaining information prior to the circle popping. And then once it does pop, you have a general plan of what you need to do, and then you execute it. And a lot of these guys, they or teams, um, with either it being lack of experience, or just not knowing, I guess, not having the information, like they just don't actually do it. So I mean, we'll see. And this into the next teams that we're talking about, this plays a big factor into them as well, because a lot of these guys are just thrown together and they're just hey, you want to play? Yeah, you want to try and qual? And here they are. So we'll see.
Definitely, definitely. But with that said, that does bring us into our next topic, which is going to be the challengers teams. Before we migrate into that, was there anything else anybody wanted to add about any of those PCS teams or anything regarding the PCS teams? I'll take it as a no. I'll take it as a no. So let's go into the next then. Let's talk about our challengers teams, boys. So when it comes to the challengers teams, there's a couple things that I want everybody to understand. Number one, we are so engrossed in PCS that we really, none of the four of us here have really gotten a chance to give them their just due of really sitting down and watching all of these. So we're kind of basing anything we talk about off of players we potentially know and very generous notes provided by Kekw, who was there to catch all of these games. So just keep that in mind moving forward. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. When it comes to the number in terms of placements, we're going to start with no cap. So easily, we're in the first for most around 16, and they finished about 20 points ahead of second place team Supremacy. And no cap was the only team in the top 8 to get more than one chicken dinner. They look very cohesive and experienced compared to some of the other teams in the lobby, and it showed within their dominance. So I know we normally pass this around, but if there, I'll let first come first serve for any of these teams for whoever wants to discuss it.
Any team at all, or
any team for no cap. So.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, they got first place, so obviously, like they're, the potential is there for them to succeed. They're going to be going against better teams now that have basically been in the position that they've been in and have qualified, right? So, that's going to be a big factor. And mainly with all these teams, it's going to with loot spots and stuff like they. Hopefully in the scrims, which I see that they're doing, they're ironing out like where they're looting and what other teams are doing around them, and just getting familiar with that. But I mean, if they were able to get first place in the last lobby of the round 16, then there's no reason why they can't get top 8 in this lobby. So hopefully they just apply the same fundamentals and just forget the fact that they got first place, because you don't want to have like a cocky attitude coming into it. Like obviously it's going to be better players, it's going to be better teams. So hopefully they could just just start from scratch and just build off of the success that they had in the last round, and hopefully it'll carry them forward.
Indeed. Was there anything else anybody else wanted to add to no cap?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is a team that, I mean, when I look at the roster, like going off what you said, I'm not like really well versed in these teams, but it's a team where I recognize names right away. You have like team players that have always kind of hovered on that bubble of almost making it into PCS, or some have some PCS experience, or in the past, NPL contenders to NPL. Like Adit was, he was on Liberate for the last 2 phases, and he's played in the grand final twice, so he's made this path up a few times. And then You So Ugly, I've seen this guy, he's been around for a long time. That's a name I immediately recognize. And Enland, the only one I don't really recognize on that team is Plube. I'm not too familiar with him, but I think he's one of your boys, Flux.
I don't know. Nope.
I thought I saw you play with him the other day.
Nah,
Never mind.
Definitely not. It couldn't be that guy.
But anyway, I look at that team and I see that the players I know, they've made these paths before, and like I said, like Gunner said, they won, so maybe they can carry some of that confidence over and continue. Confidence is key in these kind of lobbies. You have to be really aware, but you have to be confident in the fights you take, because that's what separates a lot of the best teams and the medium teams, is one team's more confident than the other. So this is a team they just need more reps. They should be soaking up as much of this time as trying to learn from every game. But they're a team I see contending for a top 8 spot.
So. Most definitely. Sil, was there anything you wanted to add to no cap?
Yeah, if you look at the numbers, they got first place for a reason. They had the most kills in the lobby and the most placement points. And I think the bigger gap being placement points goes to show that they're, like the kind of people that they put together are veterans of the scene, in the sense of where they at least have an idea of what works in this kind of lobby. Even though, in the lower tier lobbies, generally the one of the biggest factors of those lobbies is their unpredictability. So you come into this, there's like 15 other teams you might not recognize, 15 other teams that might have been put together strictly for this run. Some of the teams that have made it down from the PCS, the previous PCSs and whatnot. You see these teams having familiar names, but whenever there's always generally a new name here or two, from the left or the right. Like, whether they pick up players that they met online, whether they met players that are coming up from the NA Pro Hub scene. Shout out to NA Pro Hub. They have a tendency to be able to show, like what they knew worked on their previous teams, and they can put that together to at least make it through these kind of challenger stages of where, they have, a working system. They have, like their loot spots, whether they change it up or not, or they come in, as the first place team in this case, and are able to quickly establish themselves. And then, seeing like, Plube is a name I've never seen before, but he seems to have very good, like a bigger impact for this team than I would expect from someone I don't, like from a name I haven't seen before. And like from why you so ugly to Nland to add it, and I'm pretty sure these guys are able to put together and kind of help a newer player like Plube like succeed, because I think that a lot of these newer players that come in have this establishment of where they want to establish themselves as a force, like in order to appeal to the higher teams and make their way up. But I think that without the guidance, it might be harder. But knowing that they have three people like that on his side in that team, that their first place, like they were in first by nearly 20 points, so it wasn't a fluke for sure. I think if they can kind of force their way through, but not necessarily force their way through, but like like work with what they have, that they can do some serious damage to the teams in the Challenger Cup, because you have this kind of like gas behind you that's like fueling you, like we were first place and you guys are the guys that the 8 guys that dropped out, like we can compete with you guys, and that like we're like, hopefully I see them not afraid to repeat the kind of first place performance here. So
For sure. And that brings us into our second place team coming out of Challengers, which is Supremacy. Also one of the more experienced teams in the lobby. Apparently, Reknar and Femme Fatale were both in the top 5 damage dealers in the lobby. And Reknar was a second top fragger. So there's some serious fragging power on the team. I spoke to somebody about them the other day off stream, and their impression was this is one of those teams where if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile and they'll capitalize on it, and they're able to convert a lot of those situations into winning situations. So they seem to be a tad bit more on the strategic side, but obviously can frag their way out of a difficult position. So I'm excited to see how they deal with some of the teams that are coming down from PCS specifically, some of the ones who might have a difficulty with being more aggressive. If Supremacy can translate against them with their aggression, I think they can do pretty well. But yeah, who wants to take it off for Supremacy?
Good.
I was gonna say, yeah. Looking at, I see some familiar names here. Hyunhee especially, and I think this is a fully Korean team. And I know these guys because a friend of mine like realized that like I was making my way up through PUBG and like wanted in as well. And I eventually got to this point where they were asking me questions of like, oh wow, like you guys team's so good, like how do I like kind of replicate this kind of stuff. I think I've definitely like conversed back and forth with Hyunhee here, and I've seen like him come in through the NA Pro Hub and play some scrims here and there, and I think that now they're trying to like they're really kind of figuring things out, and then they have this constant trajectory like making it up. So like I'm curious to this team, and I wonder like like I want to know more of how they got to this point, because it's pretty impressive to see like a group of guys, whether like it's one or two, or like just an all new team together, like make their way up from like I guess like even as individuals. So I'm definitely more keen on seeing what they're like for sure. I think if they can do well in this Challengers Cup, it'll it'll only benefit them that much more. So
Definitely. Gunnar, what do you sounded like you had something to add there in the beginning.
Oh yeah, no, I mean it's not like much. Like I was gonna say, like I see them in TDM a bunch. Like whenever I join TDM with the team, I'll see them in there, and then obviously from watching scrims in the past, I see them play a bunch. So like, it's good to see that like that hard work is paying off, and like they find themselves like in second place through the round 16. So I'm happy to see them make it to the Challengers Cup, and same with No Cap. Like if they have the ability to put up 92 points in 12 games in this lobby, like there's nothing stopping them from being able to hit like that top 8. So I mean, hard work pays off, and it's just this is a perfect example of it. So good for them.
Definitely, definitely. Trevor, anything you wanted to add to that?
Just going off what Gunner said, kind of too. Like these are just some names that I recognize here. That's pretty much all I know about them. But it sounds like, based on what Sean said, they're a team that wants to put the work in. But I can remember, like, even back when I used to play a lot, I'd grade pubs all night. I'd run into some of these guys, and so they've definitely been around for a little bit, and they played the game for a long time. Maybe this is their first like foray into competitive here, but I always have respect for anybody that wants to put the work in and wants to get better. So I hope they have a good weekend.
Definitely, definitely. And that brings us into third place, which is Kekw Keyers, which is allegedly a bunch of W Keyers, Retaliative and Tomas being some of the main fraggers for them. And then the other members of the team proven to be able to hold their own. Winnie was able to hold off an entire team by himself. Really the situations go on. I like their aggression. I know that kind of, I guess I'm somewhat biased because I dislike one of their members greatly, but watching them play, I love their aggression. I love their fragging power and their aggression, and I think that if they're able to tie that in with a lot of really strategic plays and intelligent plays, I think this team has a tremendous amount of potential pushing through. I think it just like you guys had said previously, when it comes to those PCS teams and in more difficult lobbies, it can be so much more punishing. So I think that with a little bit of strategy behind them, they might be able to figure out that right balance in how to manage their aggression and their fragging power, but also still place. But yeah, I open the floor to you guys for Kekw Keyers.
Yeah, I mean, it's a team like people like in NA are going to be familiar with for sure. I think all 4 players on their team are pretty like pretty well known like around the scene, and have been playing and grinding for a while. With your buddy that you say you don't like that much, Rhett, like I think that dude's got a ton of potential and he's mechanically really good. So I'm happy to just see him. Like I really want to see him in PCS. Like I truly do. I pitched him to some of the PCS teams that were looking for players, but it wasn't much time for me doing so for the last PCS. So, like it didn't happen. But I've been vouching for him for a while, and I mean honestly, I'll vouch for all the players on that team. I think it's a great team that shouldn't have an issue in this lobby as long as they just play smart and just play together. Like they have the mechanical skill on their side over most of the teams in this lobby. So they just need to keep their composure and like have some cohesion, and they should be fine.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, definitely. Anything else anybody want to add?
Yeah. When I look at this team, it's definitely like Gunnar was saying earlier. There's some teams that just feel like they're just thrown together and they're like, "Let's go play it." And I feel like that's kind of what this team was. When I look at them, like I recognize all the names, and I feel like they all maybe had different aspirations trying to get on a team, in PCS or whatnot. And then they just said, "Well, screw it, let's play together." And it shows that they have the experience and the capability. I mean, they're only 2 points off Supremacy. They're basically a second place team here, and I think this is a team that this is a team I look at and I just go, if they stuck together and they worked on it and they put the time in, they have the potential to definitely to carve out their spot as well in North America.
Mm-hmm.
So excited to watch them play.
Definitely. Still, anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw Retaliative's name, and I was playing pubs, and I got destroyed by this guy, and I was like, "Holy crap!" Like, it almost feels like I just went up against another pro player, because like I can generally like immediately realize like who is seasoned in the game and who isn't. And I remember looking at the PUBG report, and I kept watching him play, and I was like, this guy's actually pretty good. Like, I don't know if he plays comp, and I like kept seeing his name around, and I would see Gunner playing with him and whatnot, and I'm like, this guy can shoot well. This guy can shoot really, really well, and then it was above average because you see like a lot of these players that are like, you know, have gone through this long cycle of PUBG esports, and he kind of stood out to me as someone like, if someone can teach him how to fit into comp, this guy can actually go pretty far. Because I think that, you know, his capability along with like the Thomas and like simply Matt and Winnie and whatnot, if they can have someone that can guide them, like, you know, as like a fifth figure, I think that this team can put it together pretty well. Because I've seen these names, you know, like slowly coming up towards the esports scene. I, you know, like I originally thought like, I didn't even know Retaliative was, you know, like someone that might be interested in competitive, and I was like, this guy should be, because, you know, he can really shoot well. And then it's not like I've run into him only once. I've run into him multiple times. I'm pretty sure I've died every single time. But yeah, yeah, like when I saw his name and, you know, see, like coming up, you know, from like seeing him in pubs and then like, you know, watching his PUBG report of how he killed me to now, like, you know, like competing in the Challengers Cup, it's really good to see. And I think that, you know, we see these kind of players come around and like see these kind of teams of where like they kind of pick up like, you know, like friends or like, you know, so people that have not even played comp, kind of put it together and like with people who have, and, you know, like take off. And I think that, you know, like Retaliative's like top fragging of this team was like no fluke, because I know like his capability. I think this team, like, you know, with Matt being the kind of like veteran figure of where like, you know, he's a very solid player, I think they can like put together something really well. And, you know, like knowing this team's like stature right now is like the third team that comes in, I think that they're one of the teams that people are gonna have to look out for, like going into the Challengers Cup of like 16. So yeah.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Well, that brings us on to ELPX. I wish I had a little bit more to say about them, but they're one of the only two teams in the top 8 who didn't win a match, but they managed to pull their way out of the group stages, or out of the group of teams, I should say, fighting for placement with a few double-digit point games, which leads me to believe that they certainly have the fragging power outright to make it happen. Some of those names I personally recognize, but yeah. I'll open the floor to you guys about ELPX.
Yeah, I mean, I spectated obviously like a lot of scrims, so I've always seen them, like, cause like we would do scrims, but then like I would also spectate the like the other lobby scrims. So I'd see them a lot, and I got familiar with them because they looted South George, which is like what we loot. So I was always like interested in like you know, what they do. And I mean, you know, one of the things that I do like is just pay attention to what other teams do from our loot spots. Like, I mean, like usually with like, you know, like really good teams like Genji or, you know, a team like that, but, you know, it's hard not to pay attention to, you know, what other teams do. So when watching these scrims, I would see them, and I mean, they do a lot of crazy stuff. They do crazy splits. They spread across the map a lot. But you know, obviously it's working for them, and they're able to get themselves into the top 8 here. You know, I'm not sure. Maybe they'll get punished for it more going into this like a better lobby. Maybe they won't. But I mean, yeah, that's pretty much what I got.
All right. Anything else anybody wants to add? No.
Looking at this team, you know how you mentioned like they're one of the two teams like in the top 8 who didn't win a match. Considering their placement of 4th, that's pretty good. Like that means that they're a stable team. And I think looking at it more, if you're a team that can't win a match, you have this kind of chip on your shoulder of where like it's either like A, we can't close it out, or 2, like, you know, they B, they're trying to figure A out, or C, they're in this nature of where, you know, they're experimenting on what can get them to a win. And, you know, like I think the more they try it, the more they'll like, you know, get to closing it out, because you will always have this chip. And I remember like having this feeling like exactly during PGC of last year, of where we were in the grand finals, and if 3 of those games at the end, if they went like a different way, we could have been in a higher placement. So, you know, you have that chip on your shoulder of where like, wow, I like, you know, if we really can close out a match or 2 or 3, I think we could be in a completely different spot. And, you know, like it's kind of a hurdle for a lot of these teams. And I think ELPX will fit into that hurdle. And, you know, I want to see how they come out on the other end, because if they can put a consistent performance in a harder lobby, that's usually more difficult said than done. That's actually really good.
I'd agree. Well, that moves us on to Cozy Crew in 5th place. And according to the notes here, kind of would have expected a bit more out of their team with the experience level they have. They have some veteran comp players, but it just not sure how long the team has actually been playing together as a team. They were still able to get top 8 though. Damage and kills were pretty much evenly split, so it seems like they have a good balance overall. I know if any of us look at that roster, you know, we have recognizable names in Nitrogen, Reno, Tetra, Vexel, all names of very capable players. So I think Cozy Crew, even though they were 5th here, I think in this next lobby, I think they have a good shot at being one of the probably I'd say top 3 if not top 5. But I opened the floor to you guys for Cozy.
Yeah, I mean, with this team, like, I mean, pretty much like what she said. Like, we don't have to get too deep into the team. Like, they're just you know, experienced players. And it's definitely gonna help them going into this next lobby. They've all been in these positions before. They've played. I mean, they've all played so many damn events that it's just you know, it's it's experience, right? Like they'll be fine.
100%. 100%. Is there anything anybody else wanted to cover on Cozy?
I think that's pretty much the story of this team. What Gunner just said. Like you look at all of us, look at this roster, and we've played. All of us have played against most of these guys, which it says a lot because three of us haven't been playing for a long time. So they've been around for a while, and they're a team with a lot of experience that I expect to carry through.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. So, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, this team has you know, Vexel, Nitrogen, Vohio, Tetra, and you know, like Nitrogen and Vohio, or like I'll call him Reno, as like, you know, most people call him. They were previously on Dodge, and even Tetra himself too. They were previously on Dodge. So, you know, this team, I wonder, you know, if they can put together a leader, I think they could do better. But you know, like seeing even Vexel on the team, you know, I coached Vexel when he in MPL when he was on Space Station and Pecadors, and I think that he's a capable player, but that team needs a voice of where, you know, like a voice where they like that individual will not only unite them but shut down whatever like any other like individual like mindset they might have. Their experience can take them like so far, but I think they need a push of initiative in order to take control of this lobby, because they can very easily do it. Some of these players, you know, like Trevor said, were competing even when me, Gunner, and Trevor were still like players. So you know they have the tools. They've seen it like, you know, like throughout the years of how PUBG has changed, and I want more from them. I really do.
Definitely. But that brings us on to Orion. So Orion was only 6 points away from 9th place, and was one of the 2 teams in the top 8 who also didn't win any of the matches. There were a lot of situations where Greta and others were able to squeeze out some extra points by stealing flushes and whatnot. And while those things might not have seemed like much at the time, with how close they were to not qualifying, it made all the difference. And it's certainly worth noting that they had a roster change with the very unfortunate passing of Rangers, so they still may be in the process of kind of finding the balance and finding the gel within the team, given that. But yeah, I open the floor to you guys about Orion.
This is a team when I was watching that they have that scrappy tendency that we've talked about with some other teams. Like they have a lot of players who will just get points, and they didn't necessarily have like one standout player. They had different players that were hot at different points. And you know, I think not this last round, but the previous round, I think Camberghini, who was a new player, he came in, he top fragged for them in the round of 64 or whatever it was, round of 32, and then, like you said, the other players had some standout stuff in this last round. I think this is a team that they're going to benefit from time and just more reps, and find like it's so like I feel like a broken record when I talk about a lot of these teams, but it really comes down to they just need time together, and they need to figure out, you know, how they play with each other. Because when I see like different players like popping off like on a team, it kind of makes me feel like, you know, traditionally on like the top teams, you see the same players they put up the same types of performances each, because players know how to play around and how to like augment their teammates like in a way and like make them perform better. So a team like this, they just need to figure out how they want to play together and study that out. But they're someone I have my eye on after watching the last few games.
For sure. Was there anything anybody else wanted to add about Orion?
They've been playing for a while now.
Mhm.
Like from I believe like even PCS1 all the way down, and I think we've seen a slight like slow downwards trend. I've seen like a couple names that have been around. Like I love Gwen Stacy. He used to be on S1 I believe, and Camborghini as well. And I think that like unfortunately with the passing of Ranger and finding like the rhythm of the team and Greta and whatnot, uh I think that this team has really had a hard time going through PCS cycle this year, and it may not have necessarily been a playstyle thing, but I feel like a lot of times they never had that extra like push from like any one player where like a lot of their times like they might have been put into a spot where they might be on the downside, and there was never that one player that would make a crazy play or like a flashy play that would like push them forward. And I think that looking at some of their players now, like Potato Chaser is a very new name to me. I don't think I've really have seen that name anywhere before, but seeing that he was able to pull out 17 kills in a group of like a bit more experienced players, like says that I think that they also have the kind of same chip as maybe like Cozy Crew have, of where
Mhm.
maybe they lack the experience, but I think that if they can try to find their identity as a team and how they want to play rather than trying to like like necessarily they didn't really do this, but like kind of wing it or try to wing together that kind of like very close to the edge, like how you said, like KS one kill here and there and
Mhm.
whatnot, and make like these kind of sacrifices for 1 to 2 points. I think if they can find and establish stability within their team, it'll benefit them a lot more than what I said of where like they never had that kind of flashy player that just gets like a squad wipe or something like that. I think if you can put together a team like this and have stable results, it'll yield much more than like an outright risk taker super like Sendy crash team. So I think this team definitely has a learning curve to achieve, and they need to figure out what is working for them and what isn't.
Mhm. Most definitely. Gunner, was there anything else you wanted to add to that team, or should we move on to the next?
Yeah, I mean, it's a team like I really like. They have a ton of potential. I know we've said this about a few teams, but I mean, this team in particular, like from the games that I've watched, I liked what I saw from them. They seem to like want to play together and try and do well. And as Purdy is trolling me, and I'm laughing, but yeah, pretty much. My whole team just gets together when I'm doing this, and they're just sending me stupid pictures and other crazy stuff to make me laugh, so they could share in the reaction that they're getting out of me on camera. So it is what
I
it
like
is.
it.
I really like Orion. I hope the best for them, and I think they could do great things.
Definitely. Definitely. That brings us on to Monkey Business, though. So they were 3 points away from ninth place. They had one win in a 4v4 where they entirely outplayed Kekw Keyers. So they certainly showed that they can have those fights against the teams placed higher in round 16. It's just a matter of doing it consistently. So I'll open the floor to you guys about Monkey Business.
I mean, they have the greatest name in this lobby. That goes without saying. I can tell you, Monkey Business LLC. We've seen the name for a while. So I know they've grinded out the NA like Pro Hub scrims, and they've accounted for a lot of Rella laughs. When the Rella saw that name, he's got a contagious laughter. That's it. So it makes me feel like I don't really know any of them, but they're probably a fun group of guys. And I know I've seen the name scrimming a lot. When you see the lobbies go up for the day, I've seen that name around for a long time, and but I don't really know much about them. They seem like they barely squeezed in here. Like you said, they're only 3 points off ninth. So we'll see what goes on in the final here.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't. Yeah, these last couple teams here, I know the end of the Challenger Cup was super tight in the point spread. So they barely squeezed into this lobby. So let's see what happens in this next one.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Was there anything anybody else wanted to add about Monkey
Yeah,
Business?
I think they qual because they've Penguin has ascended. He used to be Little Penguin. now he's Big Penguin. So he's hit an ascension point, which is fantastic when as a player you could do that. So I mean, it's a given right now. It's 110% this team calls. But on a more serious note, I'm familiar with the players from watching scrims and stuff. They could definitely do it. And now that they have Big Penguin and Little Penguin's out the door, they're qualling. You mark my words. That's a 6th place team right there, 100%. Mark my words.
Big Penguin.
They're qualling.
Oh man. Okay. Was there
For
anything
real,
in...
dude's name was Little Penguin. When he was on Snow Patrol, and I know it because they used to crash us and do some crazy shit all the time. And then he was from Louisiana, and he called Civ out. Because Civ's from Louisiana, and he told Civ to come see him in a gunfight.
Oh my
And then
Jesus.
we would clap their cheeks every time we ran into them. And then I guess he rebranded. He's now Big Penguin. I respect that shit. I respect the Penguin. Let's go.
All right. Well,
I respect anybody that'll call out Civ. That's hilarious.
yeah, for sure. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on with Monkey Business, or are we good there?
Yeah. I love that team name, and I love that I know that now about Big Penguin. Yeah, this point cast was really close because they had between 9, 10, 11 was 3 points. The cutoff was 70. This team has 72, and honestly, like look at. I've seen this name, like Trevor said, in the NA Pro Hub, like scrimming here and there. I never really looked into them all that much. I kind of did see them, fit into the name of, like making these crazy moves across the map. And whenever I see, it doesn't matter what team it is, if they're not within that top 16 scope, and I see them making whatever big dick play it is against another established team, let's say SDK or something, I kind of give them props. And I'm like, I don't know if they know this, but they're about to either get destroyed or destroy a really good team, and I wonder if it's gonna give them this clout. But yeah, I love the name, and I think that if they can shake off how close this points gap might have been, I want to see them absolutely take off, but also make very calculated decisions. And I just love what I know about them now. So extra props to those guys. I love it.
For sure. All right, but that brings us to our last team, which is Play for Fun, who just barely qualified with 70 points over ninth place's 69 points, and was able to get 1 win. They may need a few more adjustments in order to contend with the top teams coming from Challengers and the teams coming from PCS. So, is there anything anybody wants to add in there for Play for Fun?
I mean, I recall seeing some of the players in ranked and stuff. So, I mean, obviously, again, that shows they're grinding, trying to get better. So, I mean, I'm happy for them that they, qualified and made this far, and I've heard some good things about them. So hopefully they could, hopefully they're getting good practice in and getting familiar with all the rest of the teams and everything going on around them. In this lobby, with the teams coming from dropping out of the PCS, and yeah, I mean, they should be all right.
I mean, they definitely have some of the best synergy for teammate names. They have a guy named You Mad and You Sad, and I gotta say that would be the most tilting name to have a kill stolen by. Usually we're just tilted that it's a Tiggleton or a Luke 12. It's like, oh god, but if You Mad stole my kill, I'd be kind of like, oh, come on, bro. It probably wouldn't feel good to get flushed by those guys either. So, maybe I don't know too much about the guys. I've seen them play in ranked, and like Gunner's saying, and judging by their team name, maybe they're just out here to have a good time and see what they're made of. So, hope the best for them.
Definitely. Anything else anybody wants to add for Play for Fun?
I think their team name just kind of fits their whole them coming from ranked. I've seen their names before for sure. What do they put together this roster for fun and whatnot? If they're playing ranked, I think it's a really healthy thing to see people that regularly play ranked put together a team and go for it. And they ended up making it. They ended up making the top 8. They're going into the Challengers Cup. I think that they could even possibly look at going beyond just Play for Fun. Maybe next PCS or next event we might see them turn into Play for real.
Yeah, they're playing.
Yeah, like we might play for fun to turn to play for real. Like I don't know. Yeah, I want to see like a bit more of this team because like you see these kind of teams in ranked, right? Like you run into this team where like, oh my god, they have like clan tags or something. They're like the sweatiest people out there. Like, bro, they're doing like legit strats, and we're trying to run around and just kill people in ranked and like have all kinds of fun. But these guys are the guys that come up to ranked, make a name for themselves on the leaderboard, and if they can translate it to like the esports part, like all the power to them. I like that a lot, and this game could definitely use more of that, of where our esports scene is enriched by everything that happens publicly, and I think it's only healthy, like no matter how serious they take it or not. Like obviously, like if they're just trolling, if it seems like they're just trolling in scrims, maybe they don't know any better. But I think that seeing teams like this is really healthy for us, and it's good. Even though I may not recognize any of these like names personally, I've seen them in streams of where they're in ranked, and yeah, I like it a lot. Maybe like I really want them to turn to play for real.
Definitely. So with that said, that pretty much wraps up all of our topics. I would like to, if you guys would indulge with me in a little bit of predictions. I know we didn't really talk about it prior to, but if you had 3 teams to watch out for, they don't necessarily have to win, right? But your top 3 picks to watch out for coming into this. I guess I'll start. I would say my top 3 for going into the Challengers Cup to pull out and just show what they're really made of. I think I'm gonna say Virtue for one. I can't really say anything that we haven't already said about Virtue, but I think that they have the capability. If they can just tie it all together, I think they can really pull ahead here and do some great things. My second choice, despite being dragged down by Retaliative, is Kekw Keyers. Again, same scenario. If they can just funnel all that good energy and fragging power and capability into one cohesive team, I think it's very possible for them. And I would say if I had to go with a third to step up and really show, I would say it would be Clueless. And I think Team Clueless is going to come in probably not feeling so great about the PCS group stages, and I think that's going to lead way to something a lot greater than what we saw them do there. But those are my 3. Trevor, do you got any 3 you're gunning for?
I definitely got 2 of your 3 as well. Like Team Clueless is my number one team to watch. I think that's the scariest team. Like as far as a roster, I think they're going to get a couple fights under their belt in the first couple of games and just roll through some teams and get that confidence flow and have an easy time with it. My second team is also Kekw Keyers. I think that's a group of guys that like they've all like everyone recognizes their names. They all have a lot of potential. They've all had spurts of greatness, and I'm watching them for sure. And then if I had to go with a third one, I'm kind of torn between Virtue and Liberate. I'm going to give the nod to Virtue because I think they're a little scrappier of a team, and I think that pays off in this lobby because they're going to be able to get they're just going to be able to get more kills. Like if you start rolling teams, you get confidence and you get going. But also wanted to add, like going off what Sean said, like a lot of us mentioned like we don't know like a lot of the players like in the bottom of these teams, but to me that's like a really good thing. Like I don't want to see always just the same recycled names. I like seeing these new guys come up, and it's kind of what everyone dreams like or is dreaming about, like the rank coming in. Like they see the banner and like, oh, sign up to play in this tournament. Now they're here. So what I would like to say to any of these teams like near the bottom is like whether you make it or not, like keep grinding. It's you're not that far off if you're making it this deep. To this kind of a tournament from hopping in the lobby with teams like ours, and like. I know Gunner looks like a tough guy, but all our DMs are open if you ever need to shoot a DM and ask for opinions on things, and we're all about I want to see the scene grow, and it's cool to see new names coming up.
Definitely. Syl, what are your top 3, my friend?
I'm gonna have to gas up Clueless a little bit more. I want to see them literally roll this lobby. I don't know, like my players like joke around with Hambino a lot, and we're like, yo, if Hambino gets flushed by this guy, he's just gonna be like, oh, this guy's nobody, just flush me, you get triggered and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, I want to see Hambino sweep this lobby, and I know that they're more than capable of it, so they'll definitely be my number 1. I think my number 2 will have to be Gravity, because I think if they're given the chance, like the way I see Challenger Cup is that it's the biggest opportunity in the top of PUBG in like anywhere, and NA specifically. I guess we want to talk about that, but I think that no matter what team comes in, it's gonna be a balance of the team that is that team that's gonna do it. They're gonna see that opportunity and do it, and then we're gonna see the other teams kind of balance it out, let the opportunities the form in front of them, and kind of play this passive game. But I think that arguably like Clueless and Gravity are gonna be the teams that really don't care who they're gonna fight, because I'm pretty sure that if they were able to like cut it close towards making it to the PCS Grand Finals, they're only looking to to cement their place here so that they can get back to a similar position. I think I'm gonna have to. I'll go with a little bit of a wild card pick here, and I'll pick someone from the bottom 8. I think that some of these bottom 8 teams might go into the round of 16, like into Challengers Cup, thinking, hey, we made it this far. What's going to stop us from going even further? I think that if a team like Kekw, and I'm gonna pick 4 actually. I'm gonna pick between Kekw and Supremacy. If they can put together their experience and put together their kind of like search for more, that they can be a team that rocks this Challenger Cup lobby. It could be so much to the point where we see someone like people from the bottom 8 of PCS, like maybe even like kicked out by one of these teams, and it'll be on their kind of discretion or like their kind of opportunistic aggression. So yeah, I really want to look out to see Supremacy and Kekw Keyers do well, and I think this should shape up to be a really good Challengers Cup. And I think that in the future, like for anybody, like Trevor may have addressed this, if you have even an inkling of setting you and your friends up for the Challenger Cup, you'll never know what happens. We have a team called Play for Fun here. Like if that doesn't like gas you up and be like, you know what, let's just try it. Like like whether it's once, twice, or 3 times, just go for it. And like even though I will say like PUBG is one of the most brutal games out there if you want to compete, and I think that if you can look at the like as big of a take a big of a picture as you can of PUBG as possible, and then try to put together an understanding that will go much further than just your power to click heads. So, this is wide open for anybody here, in my opinion.
Definitely. Gunner, last but not least, my friend, who are your top 3?
All right. I mean, this is pretty hard because I know we had said like a bunch of teams could be like top 5, top 8, but man, I don't know. I'll try. You know what? I'll switch it up a little bit from what you guys did, because you guys kind of picked the same, like the same teams. I'm gonna go ahead and change it up, and I'm gonna pick SDR, Kekw, and Liberate.
Yeah. All right. All
Yeah,
right.
that's fair.
I like it. I like it. So, what are we betting, boys? What are we betting? Let's talk some funds. I got $5 on Kekw Keyers.
Winning, like getting first place, or
Well, with retaliative losing, but no. Well, I'll joke aside, winning. I got $5 on Kekw Keyers.
I like it.
If I'm a betting man, I'm putting my money on Clueless. Rue's gonna come home from the gym. He'll be pumped up. And he just might be quiet and he'll kill the whole team. Like he might farm damage in PCS games, but he's gonna farm 4 kills. On the side, while Hambino and the rest of the crew are just rolling through the rest of the team. So if I got, I'm claiming Clueless before the other 2 can get to him. So
I like it.
if I had to put 5 on it, I'm putting it on Liberate, my boy Baja.
All right. Still, if you got to throw 5 on
Really
it, boy.
Honestly, I'm gonna completely change it up, and I'm gonna put it this way: if Supremacy, I'm looking at you guys. If Supremacy can break into the top 5 of the Challengers Cup, that's 5 right there.
Boom. We got it here, folks. Hell yeah. Let's go. Yep. Well, guys, that is all we have for today. I appreciate you.
I got something else.
Okay. Wait, I lied.
I got one more thing.
Okay.
Because I know I saw some of the players that are currently going to be playing in the Challenger Cup in your chat. So I'm telling you to just go in with an open mind and like try and watch what better teams do. Like, don't have an ego, don't be cocky. Just, it doesn't even have to be North American teams that you watch. Just go watch VODs and try and figure out what the good teams do that loot where you loot, and try and understand and pause the rotation down and try and figure out why they're doing it and what they're doing. And it'll help you tremendously. And that's all I'm going to say. I mean, like, it's just the amount of preparation that comes into with these lobbies, I feel like is very minimal for teams that really want to qual. So just instead of sitting around jacking off watching us, like, just go pause us and put on the VODs, watch what good teams do, and just try and learn.
Definitely.
That's all I got. That's all I got.
Another thing to add there too, off what Gunner's saying, in a lobby like this, you can have some really explosive games, and I would tell those teams as well, like, treat every, like, one thing I tell the guys, and I'm sure these guys tell their guys same thing, is treat every game like it's a brand new one. Like, if you got a, you might get a 0-point game or a 4-point game or whatever, but head into the next one, like, keep the mental straight. It's a big part of the long form, or I guess it isn't really long form tournament, but that's a big part of these multi-game tournaments over multiple days, is keeping your head in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Always fighting for it. It's top 8. You just have to be in the top half of this lobby. Anything can happen.
Definitely.
Yep.
Definitely.
Put it together, make it happen, boys.
I was going to say, Syl, you got to say something now. You got to say something.
Coach, words of wisdom. Here we go.
All right, here we go. So, I think other than what you guys have stated already, you have to look at a lot of the reasonings, and you can look at PUBG and be like, oh, like, it's kind of a game of poker where, like, you kind of put bets on yourself and you kind of put bets on other teams and you kind of succeed. But I think that if you can look behind that, if you can look at the big picture of reasoning and add each reasoning up of why, like, things happen and also why moves are made, you can quickly figure out that a lot of times it takes like more than just an observation to see what like some of these teams, like let's say like our teams, what Sonics, SDK, and Oath might do, and why we're like constantly so consistent to the point where we're literally like top 3 in every single event of like the year. And there's a reason to that. And I think that even though we might not like necessarily publicly disclose all the reasons, that there's a recurring theme of finding what works and finding the consistency of how to push yourselves forward as a team. And I think that if you guys can, like, do your homework and study, like, not just one region, that you can expand not only your knowledge, but you can also look for even deeper answers than the basic questions you might have. And I think, like, while you shouldn't be looking too, like, literally at certain things, I think that you can also count, like, what you can or can't do. And sometimes, like forcing it, or sometimes trying to like force the impossible might not work. But like, it's all about the stability, I think. And like, it doesn't matter who it is. Like, like, think of it this way: if you go up against somebody, they can outclick you. Like, they can outclick your head. So, like, treat it with respect. And if you can come into every game, whether it's scrims or not, like, take it as a learning experience, you can only go up from there.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I agree. Well, we got the words of wisdom, boys. With that said, we're pretty much ready to wrap up. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. Owen, thank you for making it here as a guest. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
100%, 100%. And is everybody watching? It was a privilege. We'll be back in a few with some PPK games and so forth. But guys, thank you. Have a good night, and I'll see you guys soon.
Till next week, guys. Peace out.
Till next week, boys. Definitely. Have a good night, friends.